no one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
No one 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 is above the law.
Oh, son of a bitch.
Presidential promise to put the law before a family.
I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
Letting the world know that he will not wipe away the decision of 12 of his son's peers.
Was asked directly, and he has said he wouldn't pardon his son if he gets convicted.
Let's wait and see what happens if he loses.
Yeah, but he said it.
He's going to get pardoned by his dad. There's no question about that.
The president has ruled out pardoning his son.
Major commitment from the president, accepting the outcome of the trial and also pledging not to pardon his son.
So the challenge for him is really to continue to live up to his values when it was really personal, and he did that today.
It seems like a pretty normal, straightforward answer, but it takes new weight when we see what Trump is saying about the outcome of his trial, what we're hearing from other Republicans who say they don't accept the jury's verdict here in New York.
The contrast is profound. To sit there and say, well, I'm not going to intervene in the legal process, and I wouldn't pardon my son. One side, Democrats and Joe Biden protecting the justice system. And on the other, Republicans and Trump protecting Trump.
Our current president of the United States has so much respect for the law that he has said he would not pardon his son. I mean, again, it's all about the contrast.
President Biden saying, I will respect whatever this jury decides, versus Donald Trump after he was convicted on 34 counts, saying the entire system is rigged against him.
Their latest attack has been that Joe Biden has politicized and weaponized the DOJ, right? That was the whole argument around Donald Trump's conviction. And this week, of course, Hunter Biden was found guilty, and Joe Biden has very clearly said he would not pardon his son, he would not commute his sentence. How stark is this difference? I mean, how can Republicans keep making this argument now that Joe Biden has really put it out there? Where's Hunter? And he stood there in a courtroom, flanked by his family, and he's accepted his sentence.
He is not pardoning his son, which he could do. These are federal charges. Right. He is not doing that. He is not doing it because he is living what it means to have a rule of law in this country. Yeah. And then if you want to know if he believes it, you could actually see what is happening with his own son.
The president, Anderson, has been really clear that he is going to accept the outcome of the trial no matter what happens.
So Joe Biden's gotten asked about, talking about law and order. He's gotten asked if he would pardon his son. He has said no. On the other side, you've got Donald Trump, who has said that he will pardon the January 6th insurrectionists. Yeah. They're not even his sons. They're just sons of bitches.
Washington said, I am not running again, because he understood the self-restraint was absolutely essential to this country, so you don't have a king. He did not pardon his son. He did not order the Department of Justice to say, don't prosecute my son. So impressive.
Could have ordered the Justice Department to halt the prosecution of Hunter Biden, according to this court. Everyone understands he's a decent man.
I think Joe Biden has a chance here to stand up for the rule of law, to say the law is the law, no matter who it is, no matter if it's Trump or Biden. And remember, part of Trumpism's dangerousness is that it tears down institutions, important institutions of our democracy. So there is an opportunity here for Biden to say, the jury found him guilty. This is how it's supposed to work. Period, paragraph, end of story.
Have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
As I said last week, I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal. The president said he won't touch it. He said he's not going to pardon his son. And it seems that Merrick Garland let it go through. How can the Justice Department be weaponized against Trump when all of that is happening?
The Democrats stand for the rule of law. Remember, law and order. And we've been saying that Trump's not above the law. Hunter Biden's not above the law. No one is above the law. And it is amazing to see the stark contrast between how Democrats handled today and how Republicans handled this whole thing over the last couple of weeks.
For years, these conservatives have been crowing about a politicized Justice Department, Biden politicizing it, and so on. What happened today? The Justice Department convicted the president's own son, his only living son. You heard the president say he would accept the outcome of the case. I know no other word for that, but presidential.
He even went so far as to say he wouldn't pardon his son. That's how much respect he has for the system.
The president has said that he will not pardon his son. What did you think of that?
I thought it was extraordinary. I mean, it was a moment of just moral clarity on the part of Joe Biden, and couldn't have been in, starker contrast to the way Donald Trump has handled his own conviction.
He could still pardon him. He said he won't do that. All of that conduct, given that it's his son, is kind of, we should pause for a moment and think about how unbelievable that is. In a million years, if the shoe were on the other foot and Donald Trump was facing the prospect of his son being prosecuted by a Biden, me, if I had been held over, a Biden holdover or Obama holdover prosecutor, not in a million years would that have happened. So, some of the people on the right, the people who support Donald Trump, are trying to cast this as some clever ops program.
Yeah.
Hunter Biden was found guilty by a jury of his peers, just like Donald Trump, because this is our justice system at work. The divide here is stunning, and it's a great reminder that one political party remains committed to the rule of law and the other doesn't.
Joe Biden has already proven he's willing to stand up for the rule of law in a way that we could all never imagine Donald Trump to do.
Pretty emphatic over the last few days that he does not plan to pardon or commute his son. What that really is him saying is, I don't plan to use the powers of the office, the powers of the presidency, to provide private relief for my family. In a sense, he's staking out a pretty bright line between being, as he says, a president and a dad. And that's not just an emotional expression. He's in effect saying, I don't think that I don't have a right, even if it's legal, and God knows it must be tempting, to use this power in a way that is not available to so many other Americans facing similar kinds of struggles. There's a kind of old school sort of flinty core to his conception of how you are to be in the system, how you are to be as a person, a moral person, and ultimately how to contend with questions of power. One of the things that anybody who spends time around Joe Biden comes to know is that he's had this long-running focus on how much he is bothered by abuses of power.
Will accept the verdict no matter what it is, and that he has ruled out pardoning his own son. Contrast that from what we hear from Donald Trump. And again, we have to underline, in no uncertain terms, President Biden saying, I will accept the outcome. I will just accept what the jury decides here. That's the way our legal system works. And no, I will not pardon my own son if he is convicted.
And the contrast is so clear in terms of decency and principle and transactional guidance in terms of how you view the world.
It is still a good day for the United States that this conviction is a prime example of the way our judicial system is supposed to work. Even President Biden saying in a statement that he would respect the outcome of this case. Those words so completely contrast with what his opponent, now a convicted felon himself, continues to say about the U.S. courts.
The contrast to how Trump has behaved, how Trump has treated the rule of law. This was a good day for the system, good day for sort of America as an example of how the rule of law should work.
President Biden told David Muir that he would absolutely accept the verdict, whatever it was, and that he would not pardon his son, regardless. And today he said the same thing in a statement. Meanwhile, Donald Trump comes out and calls the justice system completely unfair. What do you think of that contrast?
There's the contrast of two different men.
Here is Joe Biden, who has lost a son who served honorably in the armed forces, who now has basically said, I will sacrifice my surviving son's future. I will allow him to serve a prison term if that's what's determined, because that is what the rule of law demands.
The president announces that he will not pardon his son. Do you think ordinary Americans give enough thought to how this system is a miracle, a gift to this country, a gift to democracy?
Does the president have any intention of pardoning him?
We've been asked that question multiple times. Our answer stands, which is no.
Perhaps the president was counting on Kamala Harris winning the White House and pardoning Hunter herself. Perhaps his calculus changed when he sized up Donald Trump's teeth-gnashing nominees for Attorney General and FBI Director. Or maybe he was just a father who had spent Thanksgiving with his family and decided to forgive a prodigal son using the awesome powers of his office, no matter what the cost to his reputation or his party. Would it be understandable? Sure. Is it what Biden himself told us to expect of the nation's chief executive? Absolutely not. In any event, Biden's decision has paved the way for President-elect Trump to wield the pardon power with equal shamelessness when it's his turn. And it has cemented Hunter Biden's place as the first son who impacted his father's administration more profoundly than any other presidential child in the history of the republic, and not in a good way. Joining us now is News Nation correspondent Joe Khalil with the very latest from Capitol Hill. Joe, lots of reaction pouring in from both sides of the aisle to this pardon.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of that frustration centered around the fact, not so much that President Biden made this pardon, but that he so insistently said he was not going to do it and then went back on his word. Republicans are generally reacting as you would expect, but what's more surprising, Elizabeth, perhaps, is the way that Democrats are reacting. Virtually no elected Democrat has, in a full-throated way, come out in defense of President Biden. What we're seeing is a lot of those who are either silent about the issue or those who are criticizing, many condemning this, saying it was the wrong thing to do, others saying that he undermined the rule of law by doing this, and others still saying that he put his family over the interests of the country. Take a look at just two examples here of many. One is Senator Gary Peters, who said today that President Biden's decision was the wrong one. He says the president's family and allies shouldn't get special treatment. This was improper use of power and erodes the trust in government, emboldens others to bend justice. And take a look at Governor Jared Polis's statement, who says that while as a father, I certainly understand Joe Biden's desire to help his son, I'm disappointed he put family ahead of country. It's a bad precedent that could be abused later by presidents and will sadly tarnish his reputation. Elizabeth, interestingly, I've heard two schools of thoughts from Democrats. Some who say that this move has sort of ceded the moral high ground for if and when Donald Trump decides to make pardons to people like the January 6th rioters, or that the fact that he's already pardoned several of his own close allies and even his daughter's father-in-law, Jared Kushner's dad. On the other hand, I've heard other Democrats make sort of the exact opposite argument, that the party standing up to their own president now secures the moral high ground, that they keep it because they're calling out hypocrisy, whether it's on the other side or their own. What we know is this conversation is certainly not done today. And in fact, we may see Republicans try to bring Hunter Biden in for questioning under a subpoena in the next Congress.
Right. Hunter Biden can no longer plead the fifth because he's got a pardon. Joe Khalil, thank you so much.
The Biden Justice Department has been politicized. That's the message this morning from not just Donald Trump, but from President Joe Biden himself. The president issuing a full and unconditional pardon to his son Hunter after repeatedly insisting in public that he wouldn't do it. And to defend his decision, the president adopted an argument that could have come straight out of Donald Trump's playbook: blame your political opponents and claim unfair persecution. President Biden said this, quote, "The charges in his cases came about only after several of my political opponents in Congress instigated them to attack me and oppose my election." The president adding, quote, "No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son. And that is wrong," end quote. President Biden pardoning his son not just for the gun crimes for which he was convicted and not just for the tax crimes for which he pled guilty. Instead, Biden gave his son an extraordinarily sweeping pardon for any and all crimes he committed, may have committed, or even merely been involved in at any point in the last 10 years. That broad language, unlike any in recent history and reminiscent only of President Gerald Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon for, quote, all offenses against the United States, end quote, that the former president had or may have committed during his entire presidency. Trying to explain his decision to Americans, President Biden made a personal appeal. He said this, quote, I hope Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision, he said last night. Understand? Americans might, though they'll have to be forgiven for thinking that all of this was off the table.
Is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
Well, is there?
I just said no. I just answered.
When would the president pardon or commute his son if he's convicted?
So I've answered this question before. It was asked of me not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I was very clear and I said no.
You said before that the president would not pardon his son. Is that still the case?
Nothing has changed. That is still the case.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes. I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
I could speak for the president, and he said he would not pardon his son.
Does the president have any intention of pardoning him?
We've been asked that question multiple times. Our answer stands, which is no.
Well, it stood until last night.
What is the reaction in and around the Justice Department on this decision by Joe Biden to pardon Hunter?
Sadness, Joe, and some disquiet, not so much about the pardon, but about the rationale that President Biden gave. If he had just stopped at saying, you know, Hunter Biden's my son and any father would do this, that would have been one thing. But he asserted that the prosecution of Hunter Biden had been political, had been selective. And DOJ officials, current and former, really balk at that because there's no evidence that that's true. He and his lawyers walked away from a no jail time plea deal, and they didn't like it because it didn't give them immunity from different kinds of conduct. And they were concerned that he could still be prosecuted under a Trump administration. And so he went to trial, he lost, then he pled guilty, and he was in a serious predicament, which is probably one of the reasons that Joe Biden felt compelled to pardon him, to spare him from prison. But people are very concerned that what this does is it normalizes Donald Trump's worldview that the DOJ is not on the level, that it's politicized, that it's not nonpartisan. And that's the big concern that I'm hearing from my sources.